and this is 1948-49 time period now. He's barely scraping by the way, right? He's trying to tell the VA to increase his monthly stipend because he's got all these wounds and war wounds and all this kind of nonsense, and he's gravely ill. And yet at the same time, he's not really gravely ill at all, and he's living as much of the life of Riley as he can. And he ends up back under Joseph John Campbell, editor of Astounding Magazine. Creator and editor of Astounding Magazine. Now, Hubbard had known him for years. They'd been old friends, and he ends up putting him up at his New Jersey home. He puts the Hubbards up there, right? Because Sarah is now a Hubbard, and by the way, she gets pregnant. So this is the time period where Dianetics starts being formulated, and Dianetics is where it all starts as far as the Church of Scientology goes. This is where things really get going in the chronology of the Church of Scientology. And Hubbard wrote a manuscript, and this was published in Astounding Magazine. It was called Terra Incognita, unknown territory, right? The mind, and he's writing about the mind. And he's got this whole sort of theory of a reactive mind and how the reactive mind is a part of your mind that only stores incidents of pain and unconsciousness that happen to you during the course of your life.
And it sounds like he's talking about the amygdala, right? The fight or flight, center of the brain.
Yes, and that's actually a bit of a misnomer, actually. Neurology is actually telling us now that that's not really what the amygdala does, but yes, the amygdala actually, apparently, from what I've just read, is actually the part of the brain that recognizes novel or new experiences and lights up the rest of the brain to tell you, hey guys, guess what? We're experiencing something new and different. Time to learn what's happening. As opposed to the same
response in the brain.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like that's what Hubbard was describing with his reactive brain, right?
Not exactly. Okay. It was much, much, much more detailed than that, and I'm gonna lay it out for you here. Fight or flight is a response to an immediate threat or danger.
Okay.
The reactive mind, Hubbard posited, is an actual storehouse for mental image pictures that you are taking every second of every moment of your life, and these pictures are being stored in this reactive mind when you are experiencing moments of trauma, stress, pain, and unconsciousness. In order for an image or a picture to end up in the reactive mind, you have to have pain connected to it and some degree of unconsciousness, even if it's just a millisecond of unconsciousness or a slight lessening of your analytical ability or power. And he divided the mind into an analytical mind and a reactive mind. So the reactive mind, Hubbard said, was the animal mind. It's the part of the mind. It's the mind that animals have, and that people. He sort of made some evolutionary stabs, but later he evolved this into spiritual entities and non-physical things. But at the time of Dianetics, he avoided the whole structure question, he called it. He said, we're not going to get into where these pictures are stored or what part of the brain is operating on this or any of that. All I know is that when we do this procedure on people, it helps them. And so the idea here is that we are taking the trauma away from these incidents of stress and trauma and pain and unconsciousness. And he called these incidents engrams. Engram, E-N-G-R-A-M, is a medical term for a trace memory in a cell, in a cellular body. And Hubbard just kind of absconded with that word because he thought it sounded good and had something to do with his concept of what was being stored in the reactive mind. They were wondering, maybe it's being stored cellularly, or maybe it's in the brain somewhere or whatever. And they eventually skipped out of that whole question. But the existence of engrams is foundational to Dianetics and Scientology. This is very, very basic part of the philosophy. So you're going through...
And just a structural parallel there, Mormonism's got this concept of the natural man. And in Joseph's early writings, you'll hear him writing the natural man is an enemy to God. And so, it's just this concept of your natural, almost animalistic primal self is, and this is very Christian, by the way, is very dirty, or it's dark, or it's flawed. And what we want to do is help you to become more of an enlightened human. So structurally, it just seems like religions need to sort of like condemn the biological / foundational, natural, primal self, and then elevate some sort of theoretical ideal that they can either hold you down and get in shame about, or get you on a hamster wheel working towards some sort of unachievable ideal. That's what I'm hearing here. You can tell me if I'm totally off base.
No, you're right on the line. And Hubbard didn't do it through religion to start with, though.
Yeah.
And but you're absolutely on line.
Is religion.
That's right.
It often starts as a con, or as a philosophy that you just find religion becomes the most effective delivery vehicle. But we'll get to that point later. Right? We'll get to that.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Hubbard started this. And remember, he was working with Campbell. He was working with a medical doctor, Joseph Winter. And he was working with a couple other guys at Bayhead, New Jersey on this whole thing. And they were working it over and coming up with different names for things. Like at first, the engrams were actually called like comatomes or something. I mean, they were coming up with new terminology and stuff. But here's the real twist on this is that all this theory and structure of engrams and how you go through life and you have this moment of pain and unconsciousness, and it affects you negatively because it's stored in a part of your mind that you don't have ready access to. And so it's subconscious. But Hubbard said it was always running, so it wasn't really subconscious. It was really always conscious. But anyway, whatever. The reactive mind is sort of the subconscious beast that lies, within you, and it will feed you these pictures with sensations and perceptions from that moment in time. Later on, if you run into that same context or situation again, and that's what's called restimulation. So you have the original incident, and then you have a later incident. Let's say you got bit by a dog. I should probably explain this so we're really super clear about it. Let's say you get bit by a dog when you're 5 years old. This is kind of the classic example that gets used. One, you have the pain of a bite. You're 5 years old. You're in a little tiny body. It's very traumatic. You're crying. You're screaming. In fact, maybe the dog knocks you over and you pass out. The dog barking is one of the perceptions you experience at that moment. The smells, the sights, the sounds, everything. Maybe a car drives by. Maybe your mom comes out and screams, "Get away from her!" And, you nasty dog, or something like that, right? Like all these things are being recorded straight into the reactive mind. They are no longer going to the analytical mind, which is your awake, aware, conscious mind. They're going into the reactive mind. You're not going to have a memory of all of this traumatic episode, even though your mind is recording all of it. So later on, you recover from that. You come back around. When you're not unconscious anymore, you're no longer feeding the reactive mind, and your analytical mind starts coming back online, and life continues. But then, let's say a year later, 6 years old, 7 years old, 20 years old, doesn't really matter. There is no time in the reactive mind. It doesn't care about time. So, it doesn't matter when later it happens. The sensations or perceptions of that incident are approximated in your current environment. Maybe you hear a car drive by and a dog barking at the same time. And maybe the temperature that day that you're here is similar to the temperature of the day you got bit by the dog. And so there's enough approximation that the reactive mind turns on and starts going, "Hey, bub, something's dangerous here. You've been in this situation before. You need to do something about this." And you start feeling a pain in your hand and you don't understand why. You feel like you need to get out of here and you don't know why. You actually have this concept in your mind from the reactive mind telling you, "Get away from her, you dog," because that's what your mom said back in the time of the incident. But you're now not recalling that incident clearly in your mind. You're not thinking, "Oh, I got bit by a dog by 5, and that's why I'm thinking this." Instead, the reactive mind is throwing it at you So you're sitting there trying to contextualize these pains and these weird feelings you're experiencing. And suddenly these words appear, get out of here. And you feel this need to get out of here. And you feel kind of like a dog. You're like, I'm not a good person. I'm a dog, because these words act as a command to you. The reactive mind is feeding it back to you, but the words act like a command. And so you literally act on the words of the command without knowing why you're doing that. You don't place it back to that incident. You have no memory of the time you were 5 and you got bit by the dog. You've forgotten all about that. So here you are, 20 years old, suddenly feeling very anxious, very uncomfortable. I got to get out of here. This is very weird, and you're in pain. That would be called a moment of restimulation, or what's called in Dianetics a lock. It's a lock on the original incident, which is the engram. So that's the terminology. It's pretty simple stuff, right? This is not really super complicated psychotherapy kind of stuff. The technique that Hubbard developed in order to recover and relive and go, de-traumatize these episodes was what was Dianetics. And actually, though, the technique that he developed was just straight hypnotism. We're talking about counting backwards from 10 to 1. Your eyelids flutter. You go into a trance state. That was all described in the book, Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health. It's all still there. Hubbard doesn't use the word hypnotism anywhere in the materials. And when he was challenged on it, he said Dianetics is the opposite of hypnotism because hypnotism puts you to sleep and Dianetics wakes you up.